Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope you're doing well. I mentioned in my last video on Emily Prager's stories, I noticed some parallels and references to the plays of Aristophanes, which I really enjoy. So tonight I sat down and reread Lysistrata, which is my favorite of Aristophanes' plays, probably the one that holds up best for a modern audience or 21st century audience. And so I'm going to discuss it, but I want to give sort of a warning or announcement on Aristophanes before I do that, in case anybody has never read any before. You might be shocked by how bawdy or lewd the subject matter and the dialogue can be. It's very much an R-rated play, so just please be aware of that. Sexual references, double entendres abound, starting on like line 20 of the play's dialogue. The whole plot of the play revolves around sex. So again, it's very much R-rated. This translation by Alan Summerstein even includes the F word in the dialogue. I'm not going to read any passages including the F word, but just please be aware. So what's going on in this play? Well, it's written at the very end of the Peloponnesian War, which has been raging for a generation between Athens and Sparta and their various allies, Delian League, Peloponnesian League. And it has not really gone well for Athens. It has particularly not gone well recently with the total destruction of the Sicilian expedition. Athens does not seem to be in a good place. They are not winning this war. And so Aristophanes writes a play in which the women of Athens, along with some friends who are the women of Sparta and women from Thebes and Corinth, other Greek cities, get together and agree on a plan to end this war that has, again, been raging on and off for a generation and has been pretty destructive. And their plan is this. They all agree that they are going to stay out of the marriage bed until the husbands will finally agree to sit down and come to terms of peace among each other. And that's the plot of the play. They make this agreement on like page 4. Some of them go back to their cities, but the rest of them go. They occupy the Athenian Acropolis with the treasury, barricade themselves in, and then they basically, announce what's going on. And it's just a question of, who's going to give in first, and will there be peace? So that's the whole comedy. And Aristophanes, like I said, basically gets us started right off with a number of double entendres, jokes like, tell me, Lysistrata dear, what is this thing about, this thing that you've called us women together to talk about? Is it a big thing? A very big thing. Big and meaty, you mean? Very big and very meaty. Then why on earth aren't they here? That's not what I meant. Otherwise they certainly would have arrived promptly. Lysistrata finally catches her own double entendre. No, it's an idea that I've been thinking over and tossing about through many sleepless nights. Something pretty flimsy then, surely, if it's so easy to toss about. So, I mean, it just, that's lines like 21 through 25. And you can tell, like, Aristophanes, he very much likes to beat around the bush. So we get this group of women from the different Greek cities together. The translator does an interesting thing where he has the Spartan woman speak with like spelling out phonetic spellings of words that make them sound Scottish to show like the different cities different regions of Greece coming together. And so this occurs, and they agree to this pact. We're going to have a sexual boycott, and the husbands will ultimately, that will cause them to be willing to settle, peace with each other. And then they go up to the Acropolis. Now, when the men find out that the women, including older women from Athens, like women who are widows, potentially even war widows, mind you, are up there, like sort of, they've barred the doors, so the treasury's locked, you can't pay anybody anymore. This group of older Athenian men come up, and they're gonna come up and they're gonna burn them out. Now, mind you, the last people who burned the Athenian Acropolis were not Athenian citizens. It was the Persians. So Aristophanes is really, he just lays it on right here. But some of his thoughts on the men of his fellow citizens of Athens. So there's a standoff in which the men and women, kind of like argue, and the men threaten violence against the Athenian women, like it's quite unpleasant. And they have they have fire, like they've brought up some coals, they're gonna start the Acropolis on fire, which again, mind you, the last people who did that were the Persians. Well, the women take buckets of water and throw it on the men, and then proceed to make a bunch of jokes about how it looks like they've wet themselves and that they're incontinent. So this is just basically running. So now that they've been repulsed, there's this really interesting passage where Lysistrata meets with the magistrate and basically makes an argument for why the women should perhaps be in charge of not just the household finances, but the city's finances, and why they have a say in what's going on in Athenian politics. And so they're having this discussion, and Lysistrata goes, imagine the citizen body is a raw fleece. You start by putting it in a bath and washing out the dung. Then lay it on a bed, beat out the villains with a stick, and pick out the burrs. Then you have to deal with the cliques who knot themselves together to get chosen for public office. You must card those out and pick off their heads. Then you card all the wool into the work basket of civic goodwill, including everyone, immigrants, friendly foreigners, yes, and even those who are in debt to the treasury. Not only that, there are many other states which are colonies of Athens. At the moment, these are lying around all over the place like little flocks of wool. You should pick them up, bring them here, and put them all together in one great ball of wool, and from that you can weave the people a nice warm cloak to wear. I mean, it's a very solid, extended metaphor there. It's sharp. And the magistrate, burrs, balls of wool, all this nonsense. What right have you women to talk like this? What have you ever done for the war effort? Done? Curse you. We've contributed to it twice over and more. For one thing, we've given you sons, and then had to send them off to fight. Enough. Don't open old wounds. For another, we're in the prime of our lives, and how can we enjoy it with our husbands always away on campaign, and us left at home like widows? And quite apart from us married women, what about the unmarried ones who are slowly turning into old maids? Don't men grow old too? But it's not the same thing, is it? And so, she goes on and she talks about how, these women have sat at home every night as their husbands come home from the juries or, the civic sessions, and they listen to their husbands complain, but their husbands never ask for any advice. Their husbands never ask for any input. They just complain and grouse about what a terrible job everyone has been doing for 20 years. And so Lysistrata's basically saying, enough is enough. And so Aristophanes has her present this really compelling view for, why, they need to listen to these women. And so from there we then get this interlude that is absolutely hysterical, where one of the Athenian women, her husband shows up with their baby and some of his male slaves, and he's like, oh, he pretends that he's only there for the baby. The baby hasn't eaten. You gotta feed the baby. And she's like, and then it turns out he gives the baby to a slave and is like, get out of here. I need you. And she goes, well, hold on. We need a bed. I don't need a bed. Oh, I need a bed. So she goes in and gets a bed. And then she goes, well, we need a mattress. And of course, he's just getting more and more frustrated and upset. And throughout these scenes, it's important to note that in Greek comedy, the actors would wear enormous phalluses, and so there's this ridiculous phallus, of course, poking out of his cloak throughout this whole scene, that is just a big joke. I need a pillow. I need a blanket. Oh, I need a perfume ointment. Oh, I brought the wrong one. I mean, it just continues with the husband just getting so frustrated, and then she just leaves. So you have that. And then it turns out that suddenly, the Athenian men are realizing there's a problem. Lysistrata, the women are actually holding firm in this. They're not going to sleep with us unless we end this war. So then the Spartans show up, and the Athenians are really scared because it looks like the Spartans are all concealing swords under their cloaks. But they're not swords. So they have to show that they're not swords, and then they accuse the Athenian men, who are all stooped over and weighed down, and they throw off their cloaks. And so if you can imagine, everybody would be on the stage with these ridiculous phalluses hanging out. And so they finally agree to go to peace. They finally agree to come to terms for peace. They realize that this is going on in Sparta, Thebes, Corinth, Athens. Greece needs to be at peace. And Lysistrata points out to them, remind you, Persia still exists. Persia is still there. Persia shortly after this, Persia will fund Sparta to ultimately, defeat Athens in the Peloponnesian War. But Persia still exists and really should be like the common threat that we're paying attention to. Well, as the delegates from Athens and Sparta agree to terms of peace with Lysistrata and a character named Reconciliation mediating these terms, we start to get some Freudian slips, including who will we be able to arouse to revolt, talking about an island that Athens would repeatedly fund a revolt there against Sparta. Who will be able to arouse? Revolt. Later on, they say, give us these prickly bushes here and the Malian Gulf behind them, and the long legs. The long walls of Megara. And so these just keep, popping up. They finally agree to peace, and then it ends with a reference. Aristophanes just slinging them left and right. It ends with a reference to Helen the Pure and Athena the Fair, as Athens and Sparta are brought to peace. And Helen of Sparta, who in Greek legends was everything but pure, although revered as a goddess in Sparta. And Athena, who was regarded as basically everything but fair, wise, brave, courageous, innovative, but not particularly a goddess of beauty. And so Aristophanes misappropriates the adjectives for the goddesses right there at the end. So it's a very comical play. Like I said, it goes to a lot of places you might be surprised by. But if you're interested in Greek comedy or Aristophanes, not so much Greek comedy or Aristophanes, but the Peloponnesian War that Aristophanes is writing his comedies during, Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War is excellent, particularly the sections on the Sicilian expedition and what a complete disaster that was. Of the Greek playwrights, Euripides was the one who was closest of the tragedians. Euripides is closest in age to Aristophanes, so he frequently comes in for little parodies. There's a couple of references to Euripides and the fact that in Euripides' plays, the female characters are often not presented the way Aristophanes presents them, as intelligent and thoughtful and reflective, but as very unpleasant and misogynistic. So, quick reference on Euripides there. Within Plato's Symposium, which I'm personally not a huge fan of, Aristophanes has my favorite section in which he describes love. And then, sort of a bizarre reference, but if you read Foucault's Pendulum with Jason over at Byways and Bookland, I would highly recommend The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, which involves some references to the Poetics of Aristotle. Famously, we only have the supposed first book of Aristotle's Poetics, which deal with tragedy. I'm not going to necessarily recommend that you read Aristotle's Poetics or that you read Aristotle at all, but if you're really interested, you could. And theoretically, there may have been a second book of Poetics that was on Greek comedy rather than Greek tragedy. And that's one of the plot points of The Name of the Rose. And that's all I'll say about that. So this was Lysistrata. I highly, highly recommend that you read it or read some of Aristophanes. He'll make you laugh. So thanks, everyone. Bye.